Okay. All right.
I'm in the restroom real fast.
Yeah, it's good.
When did you get it? Did you get it? I got in yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
Okay. Well, I live in Detroit. Like,
Oh, that's
well, I
right.
live
You
in the
both.
suburbs of
Yeah.
Detroit, so yeah.
Okay. You're not
So
too far.
not too far, but I did stay down here last night.
Nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I had some like work,
Yeah.
my work colleagues here, and it was a chance to catch up
Yeah.
with them.
Just connect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good. I'm gonna take this off.
This was just to go outside.
It's a little heavy. It is. Yeah. So where are you?
Out of Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, not
So
too
it's an
far.
easy flight.
Yeah, about an
Yeah.
hour and a half.
Yeah.
Not bad at
Not
all.
bad. So.
Yeah, awesome. I've never. I think I've always flown through Detroit. I don't think I've ever actually been
Oh,
here. So
really?
yeah, this is
Okay.
awesome.
Did you get in yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So had the afternoon, evening,
Yeah.
kind of
That's nice.
decompress and
Yeah.
awesome.
Register.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Okay. Are you gonna introduce some of us, or are you gonna have us introduce
Um,
ourselves?
I think like I'm not gonna like we have the bios on the slide,
Yeah.
so I'll read through those. And then like once you like because it's weird because the instructions that I have to read before we get started have like the math section
Yeah.
part of it, but then
Okay.
we have it in the slide deck. So I'm like, okay. I think what I'll do is kind of skip what they have in the introduction
Okay.
sheet because I have to skip it and kind of sign it and that
Oh
sort of
yeah.
thing. So I'll just skip the intro for that. I'll read the official bio, but then I'll invite once you guys start talking, I'll just invite you to share, kind of elaborate on your background and as you start to answer the questions.
Okay.
Just so you're not like answering the first question, right away. You can just, kind of elaborate or go from there. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Whatever you want.
we'll read the formal bio for sure, but I don't have to do the bio.
Scan
Just,
us in.
yeah,
Is there a white and green sheet?
no, there's no paper.
Okay, all right. I remember.
Okay. Yep. I think I was just kind of reminding myself of the slide deck. Um, so like I'll go through the opening stuff. I'll read the bios.
Do you want to do that or just have us introduce ourselves? Maybe
That's
get
what.
like a
Yeah,
hand
that's what
out.
we were kind of discussing. Do you think maybe like when your slide comes up, we can? Is
Yeah.
that like a good way to introduce? So it'll be up on the screen. They
Because
can
it's on
see
the
it.
screen, we can just give like an overview. Yeah.
Yeah, you
I'm
don't
not
have to
gonna
like
read it.
actually read through. No, I don't even think you. Unless
That's
you
the
can.
detailed version.
Yeah, they can see that. But yeah, that'll be. I'll just kind of say, like say his name's Brooke. Brooke, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about you? So,
Yep.
and then they can read that later. But yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
a good way to do it.
Okay.
Okay, good. So we'll do that, and then right after the intros, I think I'll throw you the first question, which is what comes to mind when you hear the word introvert. And so then I'll throw it to one of you,
I
each of
think we
you.
can probably both answer.
Yeah,
That way I
both.
can go first.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
So I'll probably have my
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. So let me just make a note. Okay. And then that would actually segue nicely into the extroverted ideal, which is basically stereotypes around introverts. So then maybe I'll just ask you for your reflections again as resumes, and then we'll lead right into strengths of introverted leaders. There's only like 3 or 4 bullet points, so I think I'll read those and then ask for your reflections.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Renisha Willis. I'm HR Business Partner for RHI Magnesita. Happy to join you today. I'll be moderating today's session titled Introverts as Leaders, Harnessing the Quiet Power of Leaders. You can read bios in the conference app. If you have not done so already, please search your device's app for this, your device's app store for the Career Communications Group and download the app now. From there, you'll be able to rate this session, contact the presenter and panels, as well as read full bios. In a moment, I'll introduce our panel members and invite them to share a bit about themselves. Again, as I mentioned, full bios are found in the app today. All sessions are live, available. They will be recorded and posted within 24 hours for on-demand use. We will take questions from our in-person audience later in the session. For those who do have questions, I invite you to please use their microphone found in the room. For those joining us online, you will be able to ask questions using the tool. You can use your cell phone to scan the QR code at the bottom of the screen now to access the session's chat feature. Without further ado, for today's session, objectives are listed on the screen in front of you, but in reality, we're just gonna talk. Okay, first I would like to introduce Brooke. I'll invite her to share a little bit about herself, but as you can see, full bios are on your screen as well as in the app. Brooke, would you mind sharing about yourself, your role, your title, and any reflections today?
Sure, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Brooke Hirsch. I work with Actilent Scientific Services as a senior practice manager. I'm one of our trained scientists that kind of really help outreach with our clients in order to ensure that their technical needs are met and then help oversee those with our different project teams. Excited to be here with you guys today. I am a self-described extrovert, but I'm very passionate about this topic and working with introverted colleagues and mentoring people that are introverted to really help them find a leadership style that works for them, and also as the extrovert in the room, also understanding where we can be better about being partners with our introverted colleagues. So that's a little bit about me, and excited to be here today, and hopefully we have a couple other extroverts in the room. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because the introverts right now are sweating. So, but hopefully we can get some good questions from you guys, and excited to answer and have a great discussion. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And I'd also like to invite and welcome Gina to the panel. Gina, please share your thoughts, your background, your role, anything else you'd like to share.
Sure, thank you. I'm Gina Farida, and I'm actually new to the Actilent company. I'm really excited to be part of a great team. I started in the pharmaceutical industry, life science industry, about 7 years ago with a staffing company. I worked on the operations end. In my current role, I'm a strategic alliances lead, so I support business development, I support delivery and marketing in their revenue generating activities. I consider myself more of an introvert, so I'm excited to be part of this panel and contribute to this great conference.
Great. Also, my bio is also found in the app, as well as on the screen in front of you. I am a self-proclaimed introvert, so imagine me being the moderator for today's session. But I think that just speaks to what we'll talk about today, which is really understanding our strengths, using them when the opportunity is there, but then having the confidence and the ability to adjust our behaviors when the situation warrants for it. So if nothing else, I would encourage you not to be confined to a stereotype or to a label, but we are all in control of our behaviors, and we definitely have the ability to flex our strengths when we need to. Okay, so I will invite you just for a second to think of the word introvert, and just think of what comes to mind when you hear the word introvert. So I'll pause just for a second, just for you to think. Maybe there's some characteristics you might think of when you hear introvert. Okay. I'll ask the panel to share as well. What are some reactions or just initial impressions if someone describes themselves as introvert? Gina, I'll start with you.
Sure. Initially, you think of someone who's maybe quiet, more reflective, more reserved. I know that's sometimes what I get classified as.
I'd probably say timid, more reserved, shy. So a lot of the same words. Quiet. I liked your reflective, though. That's a good one. I think those are just kind of a couple of them that come to mind right off the bat as, somebody who's maybe not as comfortable speaking out or sharing their voice or their opinions.
Yeah, more of a listener rather than a speaker.
For sure. Yeah, hopefully those of you watching and in the room today, excuse me, have those same thoughts. My question then is, are these characteristics that you would define as strong leaders? I've got some nodding, some confused faces. So would you put on your resume that you were quiet, reserved, listening, not speaking up? Maybe not so much, right? So there's definitions and characteristics of introverted leaders, regardless of your skills, knowledge, and abilities, that you might not necessarily define or maybe even be perceived without looking at a resume as characteristics of strong leaders. So there, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, there's a disconnect, right? We have these skills, we have these abilities, but when we characterize ourselves as introverted thinkers, which there are very much strengths in that thought process, that's not always well received by those who maybe don't understand it. So we're here today to talk about what is that gap? Why do we hear introverted and not necessarily think of a strong leader in all cases? So now we'll talk about extroverted, and we have an expert extrovert on our panel today, so I would love to hear everyone's opinion. But really we're going to start with talking about what's the extroverted hype? When we think of extroverted people, why does it seem a little bit more fitting that these might be stronger leaders? I think when we hear extroverts, we naturally assume that this person, regardless of their background, would be a stronger leader. So as we know, extroverts, they're energized by people. They're enthusiastic, they're excited. They express their thoughts, sometimes without our asking. They share openly, they're passionate. They prefer large groups, they don't mind crowds. They're comfortable talking about their accomplishments. They don't need probing to get them started on what they've done, the value that they bring to the organization. And they're comfortable winging it. So they could easily be put on the spot, and that does not necessarily bother them. Introverted people, we want to be prepared. We want to feel like we've given it thought in order to feel like we're able to bring our full best self. But extroverted leaders and individuals, if you put them on the spot, they're ready to go. I'll ask the panel, any other characteristics you might add to this list? When you think of extroverted people, what comes to mind? Brooke, we'll start with you.
Loud. I think you said energetic, but it's almost to the point of being too energetic, like overwhelming. Sometimes I feel like extroverts can be to introverted counterparts. Boisterous, almost egotistical sometimes, because not afraid to talk about some of their accomplishments and things that are going on in their world or share their opinions. Sometimes they just won't stop talking. So I think, as an introvert, you could just be drained by the amount of feedback that you're getting in a situation, because us extroverts like to talk and talk and talk, and that can be draining. So I guess I'll toss in a mild suggestion for extroverted counterparts is know when to read the room and when to stop talking, so that you're not overwhelming people or being too loud or too even aggressive. I think sometimes that's another word that we can associate with extroverts.
Great. And I will go to Gina, but I do, just for those coming in, and as a reminder, I would love to have this be a conversation. So if you have thoughts, comments, or questions, please just welcome yourself to walk up to the mic so that we can hear you both in the room and online. But please join the conversation. I'm sure you have thoughts and experiences about but either introverted or extroverted characteristics or even stereotypes. So please help yourself if you would like to join the conversation. Gina, your thoughts?
Yeah, so when I think of an extrovert, you think of someone who's loud, really outgoing, someone who likes to be in a social setting. And with work, I often see them, they like to bounce their ideas off people. I feel like they just vocally brainstorm whatever their thoughts are, versus I like to kind of think things through before I say them, and then I like to talk about it, like part of a team meeting. So it's just trying to find that balance.
For sure. Good. Okay. So we know, probably in the room, many of you may describe yourself as introverts, but we know, data shows us that there are so many characteristics and strengths of introverted leaders. There's just a few here on the screen. And again, I'd like to invite the panel to comment. Listening was a common theme I've heard already. So, introverted leaders and individuals are really good at listening. And not just listening, but they're listening with an intent to contribute. And that takes time and patience and quiet sometimes. So when we are describing extroverts as loud and talkative, it's a perception that introverts have that they're talking, so they must not be thinking. And so as much as we like to multitask, you really can't think and talk at the same time. So an introverted strength, when you think about leaders, just imagine. We describe, our role models, our mentors, our coaches. One of the first things we most likely say is they listen to me, they understand. And so why isn't this something, characteristically speaking, when we think of introverted people, why don't we describe that as a strength? Sometimes it's quiet, but quiet is also a synonym for listening. So just one of the strengths I kind of want to repurpose in our mind, that when we're quiet, we're listening, and that's a strength. Introverts get energy from within. So, it's not necessarily being quiet or shy or reserved or not, good at networking. It's really just kind of filling a battery sometimes. Just quiet, introspective thought allows us to just collect ourselves, reflect, kind of replay back maybe a conversation or the day's events in our head. And so that's good. The reflection is also a strength. Again, we talked about giving time for accurate, thoughtful responses. So I'll share a little bit of a story. I have a counterpart of mine that I love working with, but gosh, she won't stop talking. Every time we're having a conversation, it'll be a group of us with leaders that we support, and immediately, as soon as there's a chance for a breath, she just jumps in with thoughts and opinions and questions. And meanwhile, I'm kind of sitting here still replaying the last 10 minutes of the conversation, thinking about what does this mean? What do I know about this topic? How can I bring my experience and offer a best practice? So while I'm thinking and in real time articulating a response, the conversation's happening. So sometimes I feel like I miss the opportunity to jump in, and that things are happening so quick when if I just would have, jumped in enough, I could have participated in that conversation. But that thoughtful, accurate response, because guarantee, once I do talk, it's a value add. I have the knowledge, I have the strength, and I have the experience to contribute. I just need that pause to think, to collect my thoughts. So that thoughtful, accurate response is also a strength that introverts bring. And then, of course, humble and calm. So it's not likely or characteristic for an introvert to just blurt out something that they've done or contributed. It's uncomfortable for someone to say, here's what I've done, here's how I contributed, here's why I belong here. I deserve a seat at the table. I think it was mentioned before that, we sometimes just need that invitation to speak up. And so, while humble and calm are very good characteristics and of leaders in particular, it's not always perceived that way, to be humble. But I do believe that it's a strength of the introverted thinker. I'll invite the panel just to comment. We spoke a little bit, but any other thoughts or stories or experiences you can think of when you think of how introverts show up and how you might define that as a strength? Brooke, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I really love the word calm, because I think so many of us work in very fast-paced environments, and so really having an introverted leader that can bring that calm is a massive benefit to, your employees, and your organization, because sometimes things just move so fast. So when you have that introverted leader that can bring that calm, they're not the extroverted person that's bouncing all over the walls or going from here to there. It's a really powerful source of leadership. So that's kind of my other word that I think of as powerful. Just a quick story, I had an introverted colleague, and we were in a big team meeting, and we walked out of the meeting, and she walked up to me and said, well, what about this and this and this idea? And I was like, oh, why didn't you say that in the meeting? That's like a great idea. Oh, I just didn't feel like I could speak up. And so instead of going down the path of, well, why not? Because I don't understand that. As an extrovert, I said, okay, how can we work together to give you the power to feel comfortable to speak up? Maybe it's little baby steps. You're not going to just walk into the next meeting and be like, yep, I'm going to speak up, because that's not in your nature. But how can we work together to give you a platform where you feel comfortable? Do you want to email your idea out later? Do you want to be able to bring it up in another platform? Like, what makes you comfortable? So really being able to harness the calm and the powerful nature and ideas that our introverted counterparts come up with, because there's a lot of great ideas out there that sometimes maybe won't get brought to the table in a group session because they're not comfortable. So let's talk about another platform that we can get that power and that calm across, and really be able to use that as a group and as a team and as an organization.
Yeah, just to piggyback a little bit on what you said in a group setting, I know early in my career I struggled with that, and I found what was helpful for me is having an agenda to the meeting, and that allowed me to kind of see, okay, well, what are the topics, what's our objective, and then it helped me kind of formalize, okay, well, this is what I can contribute to the meeting and get my thoughts down and being able to participate that way.
Good. Thank you. So I just want to remind everyone that introverted thinkers can be recognized as very strong leaders. On the chart in front of you, the slide in front of you, are notable people who have self-described themselves as introverted or at times exhibiting introverted thinking. So we have Mary Barra, who you may recognize from sponsorship of today's event, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Janet Yellen, Warren Buffett, Emma Watson, Nelson Mandela, Abraham Lincoln, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Rosa Parks. I think with the last name there is kind of a very good visual of how quiet leadership has changed the trajectory, of our civil rights movement. So by simply using quiet power, in her case, sitting, can be a strong leadership. And so we don't always speak to that part of her leadership. We speak to the impact, and we speak to what's happened after that, but we don't always take time to think that all she did was sit, and that was a source of her leadership that changed the course of what we know today. So if you're feeling isolated at times, just remember some of these strong leaders who used the power of their quiet, introverted thinking to change history. Okay, so just we've hit on some of these, but a few characteristics and descriptions of what introverted thinking is not. So it's not being insecure. It's not being incompetent. It's not being not strategic. You're not bad at networking. You're not uninterested or disinterested. You're not shy. So I'll ask the panel to comment, and also, again, invite the audience to share some of your experiences with, these labels. How have these labels impacted your career or those of your peers? What happens to people who maybe have some of these characteristics when they do go for opportunities, for experiences? Any impact? I'll start with you, Gina.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that are like common misconceptions. And I often get, well, you're so quiet and you're more introverted. How are you in sales? Because, you know, when you think of sales, you're thinking of someone who's super outgoing, maybe a little pushy, not someone who's more reserved and quiet. And for me, I'm just a really good active listener. I'm really good with solutioning. I'm really good with problem solving. And I found that that's really helped you know, drive my business development side of my career.
Great. And Brooke?
Yeah, I think the one that stands out to me on the board is uninterested. I had a young woman who worked for me, and you know, we had a lab manager position up, and she came to me and said, well, I'd really like to be considered for the position. And I said to her, oh, I didn't think you were interested in that. And she said, well, I am. I'm not like the other person that's up for the position that's, you know, out there and in your face the whole time and trying to promote themselves. So, you know, she was able to kind of pull me aside and really kind of explain to me like, hey, this is why I am interested. But that was my incorrect perception of her, was that she was uninterested just because she was more introverted and more shy and wasn't the one, you know, constantly raising her hand in our group meetings and things like that. So being able to really find, again, a way that makes you comfortable to have those conversations as an introvert with, maybe you have an extroverted boss or maybe an extroverted leader, so that they can understand. And then if you are an extroverted person, breaking down those stereotypes in your mind, like, don't just assume they're uninterested. Maybe it'll take you even just asking them, like, hey, is this something that you are interested in, or is this something that, you know, what are your goals? What are your career goals that you want to achieve in your time here, and making sure that they understand that and you can partner together in a way that makes sense, that makes everybody comfortable.
Good. Thank you. Okay, so I'll invite both the panel, our in-room audience, and everyone watching online to indulge in a very brief activity. I promise we won't take pictures or laugh at you, and I promise there's a method to the madness. So, for 10 seconds, I want you to just literally put on your face the biggest smile that you possibly can, just ear to ear, just go for it. So I'm gonna count down. We're all gonna do it together so that none of us are looking crazy. And we're just gonna smile as big as you can from ear to ear. Okay? Everyone's sitting here like, if this person beside me doesn't do it, I'm out. I promise, if we all do it, it won't be weird. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. Okay, we won't do 10 seconds, but you get the point. So the purpose of that is really just to give kind of a physical reaction to how sometimes it can feel for introverts to be surrounded by extroverts. You know, it's kind of this awkwardness. It's feeling like you have the biggest smile on your face, but it's not genuine. It's weird, uncomfortable. So for those of us who are introverts, maybe sometimes we can, you know, recognize that as, you know, ideas are happening in meetings, we're solutioning, things are happening so quick, but you're just kind of frozen. You're not able to contribute because sometimes you just need, again, that time to pause, to think, to reflect, and then to offer what you feel is your best contribution. So hopefully for all of our extroverted partners, you'll remember how awkward it feels to sit there and smile in a disingenuous way when things are happening. Hopefully that resonates with you all. It's just kind of a feeling of having to contribute at a way that doesn't feel natural. Okay, so let's talk about what we can do. So I'll invite the panel to add to this list, but here are a few ideas of what might help. How can introverts optimize their performance? How do we operate in a way where, generally speaking, extroverted ideals are just more expected, just more common? First one is align your strengths with your organizational goals. So think about just what your organization needs. What direction is your organization headed in? Are they gearing for innovation? If that's the case, well, you need really good ideas. In order to have really good ideas, you have to think through what's going on. You have to think through a really solid solution. And that's where the introverted strength comes in. Next one is be intentional about your behavior. You can change your behavior. Again, I am naturally introverted, and it doesn't hold me back, right? I present on different topics all around the world. I work with an international organization. On any given day, I'm speaking with someone from Europe, from Brazil, from US, from Canada, and from Mexico. In any given day, I can talk to partners from around the world. And I need to be able to adapt not only my pace of speaking, but the language that I use, some of the jokes that I make. And so while my natural instinct is to just listen and be on a call and just agree and, maybe after the call figure out what's going on, but I've learned to adapt. So I have a natural style, but I know that other partners of mine really could use a different approach. So it's okay to change when the situation calls for it. Other one is be present in a meeting. And this is hard because meetings are happening and we haven't had a time to think. But one tip that I've used is even if I haven't fully thought out my idea or my contribution, I just kind of state an observation. So we may be talking about a solution and I haven't quite decided if I'm in agreement or not. I'll just state an observation and say, I notice we haven't talked about this topic. How do we feel about that? And it just gives me long enough time to get my thoughts together. So you don't necessarily have to have the answer, but to state an observation or to kind of state what you see happening gives you time to think. There's other ideas on the board, but I'd love to invite the panel to jump in. We'll start with Gina. What are your thoughts in terms of what introverts can do to optimize their own performance?
Yeah, something that's really helped me is, I guess, with my colleagues in my workplace, is having one-on-one meetings, which I feel like oftentimes is really underutilized, but it gives you the opportunity to really build that relationship, get to know that person, kind of learn the way they work, and then once you're part of a bigger group discussion, you kind of already have that relationship that you're building, and it makes, at least it gives me that comfort and openness to be able to contribute more.
Great.
I think my thoughts and advice here is a couple different things. I think one, maybe see if you can pair up with a more extroverted partner who you trust in a one-on-one situation. You can explain to them how you feel, how you operate best. I think we're bucketing people as introverts and extroverts, but there's a very large scale on both ends of those people. You could have, I bet the introverts that are, really, really afraid, like aren't even in this room today, right? They're at home, or maybe they're listening online, just because the thought of being in a group session like this would just send them into a panic. So just kind of really finding like a mentor or an advocate that could work with you to ensure that they know that you're there, they know that you're in the room, they can help you out in a way that makes you comfortable, right? So if I'm working with a partner that I know is introverted, I'm not going to turn and call on that person in a meeting because I know that that's not what makes her comfortable. So what does make her comfortable? Is it downloading after the meeting? Is it another way to kind of express their ideas in a different format? So really kind of working through that. So pair up with somebody who you feel like will take the time to learn about you and understand you, because I think that's why I'm here and very interested in being on this panel, because I want to harness everybody's leadership power, no matter what you describe yourself as. If you want to be in leadership and want to move up, there shouldn't be anything that holds you back. My second little piece of advice too is don't be afraid of change and growth. And that doesn't have to happen in leaps and bounds. That can be baby steps. It can be one little teeny tiny thing. So if the thought of speaking up in a meeting makes your hands sweat and makes you shake, then yeah, let's not go to like, hey, we're gonna talk in a meeting tomorrow. But what's a baby step? Maybe there's an article that you can read. Maybe there's something that you can do as far as self-development. Constantly learning to grow and change and be outside of our comfort zones is something we all have to do, even if we're introverts or extroverts. And so figuring out the best path for you as an introvert that gets you to that growth and that change point that makes you comfortable. Because as she said, she's now standing up here in front of you talking in front of an audience, and maybe she wouldn't have done that 10 years ago or so. So what can you do, baby steps, to get yourself on that path and on that trajectory? And like any muscle, you got to use it over and over and over again to make sure that it's strengthened. So it takes diligence and a commitment to kind of get on the path to growth and change. But if you do it, then you can be at a spot where you are comfortable and you can, you know, be that leader, that introverted leader that we all need.
Good. Gina, anything to add in terms of what introverts can do?
Yeah, so just to piggyback and to go back to what I said about the one-on-ones, it's just creating more of that kind of safe environment for people to be able to express themselves, especially as an introvert. So for myself, in my experience, it's really getting to know people and getting comfortable with them, which then I'm feeling more comfortable to freely express what my thoughts are, let's say on a project, or slides about a presentation we're about to have. Oftentimes too, it's having the material ahead of time, and maybe having a discussion with, you know, that more introverted person on the team, like, hey, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on these slides. You know, we're about to have a bigger team discussion. Maybe take a look at it ahead of time and then come prepared with a few of your opinions.
Great, thank you. The other thing I'll add, just from a personal standpoint, I personally invested in an executive coach. And I used to think, like, what's a coach going to tell me about myself that I don't already know? I've taken all the assessments, I've been to the webinars, I hear all of it, and everyone just tells me to just talk more. And that's true. That's a lot of what we hear. But what I've learned through my experience with my executive coach, and still very much a work in progress, is if I approach conversations from a curious mindset. And so instead of just sitting there thinking that everyone thinks that I'm shy and quiet and incompetent, I don't belong here, why is she here, to ask curious questions. So, you know, hey, I noticed, you know, we didn't consider this. I noticed that this person is not here. I noticed that this was your recommendation. I'm curious where that came from. So even if in your head you're feeling a certain way or you feel like a decision has already been made, if you approach the conversation, instead of just saying, you excluded me from the email, you know, why did you do that? You know, approach it from a curious mindset. And that really invites conversation. It invites collaboration and gives you the platform that you need to state your case or your opinion or concern, for example. So it's not natural for an introvert to just walk up to someone and say, hey, what do you think about this? But if you say, I'm curious why the decision was made for this. Can you tell me more about that? It allows you time to hear a background, to hear the thought process, and then naturally they might say, what do you think? And then there's your platform to really insert your expertise. So I've learned, and one of the things I've learned is curiosity helps. And that's something that introverts are great at, right? So it's really just taking a situation and playing it to your strengths instead of having to force your answer and interject yourself in maybe what feels like an assertive way. You simply ask a question, and that invites a question back. So I've done that. I'm living proof that it works. I've gotten very good collaboration and insight and very honest, constructive feedback, quite honestly, when I asked a question and invited that conversation. The other thing that I would highlight that has also worked, was I hit it on a little bit earlier, is to be clear about why you're in the meeting. Sometimes we go to meetings because we're just invited, and then we sit there like, well, this person has expertise in this area, so they're going to talk to that part of it. This person has done this before, so naturally they're going to be the one to do that. But I would invite you to be clear about why you were invited to that meeting. Sometimes the clarity of why you're there helps you to have a pitch or kind of an angle. So maybe you're there to challenge the status quo. Maybe you're there to validate some of the research or recommendations. Maybe you're there to be an expert in one particular area. And so depending on your role, you'll bring data to speak specifically to that target. So you'll know to bring the data on exactly what you're expected to contribute. And you'll know that when they're talking about this particular topic or you hit that particular agenda point, that's your time to shine, and you'll know to speak up at that point. So sometimes we're just not clear of why we're here, what our role will be. So if you're put on a meeting or you're asked to, you know, show up somewhere and you're not 100% clear on what the team expects from you in that environment, I would say ask. You know, go to the meeting organizer or department leader and say, I'd love to participate. I'd like to be clear on what you expect from me. What data, experience, observations, et cetera, can I bring to be of most value? And that in itself generates and invites conversation for you to be clear about that. So just 2 things from past experience I've learned to incorporate as well. So we don't take for granted that there are people who are listening or in the room who have the ability to influence workplaces. So maybe you lead a team. Maybe you're leading a project. Maybe you're in charge of departments or mergers and acquisitions. So looking within your circle, whether you're responsible for a direct team or not, we all have an ability, as it was stated before, to invite people to the conversation. So when looking at workplaces, what can we do collectively to have a more inclusive environment? First one is set up workspaces to engage and collaborate. So maybe it's just a few chairs to sit and talk. Maybe it's removing a table from in the middle of a room and just allowing people to sit and be physically closer together. And, set up the meetings to include both writing time and talking time. So you may start off your meeting to say, I'd like everyone to jot down first 3 ideas about this particular topic. And that allows the introverts to take just 5 minutes to write down their thoughts, and then they'll be prepared to contribute. They've had at least a few minutes to share and think before they're asked to actually speak up and contribute. So it's really just a diversity topic, diversity of thought, diversity of approach, to invite people to contribute in more than just one way. Again, be clear on the agenda and the role in which you play. Offer professional support. So again, I've been blessed to be able to be supported by my employer 100% with not only short-term webinars, day conferences like today, but also an executive coach, also the time to take off to pursue opportunities, to travel around the company, to tour with, even outside of my natural role. So I don't just stay within HR, but I actually go out and take tours of our steel mills, of our plant manufacturing floor, so that I can truly understand what the expectations are of me and my team and my role. So having the broadest knowledge and experience and network, quite honestly, helped me to bring the best version of myself. Looking at bias. This is not always the most fun topic, but sometimes there's an exclusion happening because of systemic bias. There's just a common expectation of what leadership looks like, thinks like, sounds like, the way they work, where they go for recreational activities. And so, be open about those observations. Be open about what you do and who you are. I remember a conversation I was having with my team, and it was years ago, and we were all trying to think of a team builder activity. And the suggestion was to go to a haunted house, or it was around the Halloween time frame. And I personally choose not to celebrate Halloween for religious reasons. And so everyone's at the table, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to dress up as this, and what's your costume going to be? I'm going to be red M&M, you be yellow M&M, and it was this whole thing, and it sounded so fun. And so I'm sitting here, and I'm like, do I interrupt this great idea going on and speak up and be the one to say, yeah, well, I actually don't celebrate Halloween, here's why? Or do I just go with the flow and put on a costume and do the thing? So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, and then I kind of paused. And I thought about my 2 daughters, and I thought, wow, I really hope one day they don't have to sit and contemplate whether to speak up for what they believe or not. So I spoke up, and I said, hey guys, if you want to go, have the best time. I choose not to participate in this type of activity, but I really want you all to enjoy yourself. So if this is the activity we align on, have the greatest time. I can't wait to hear about it when you get back, but I'll choose not to participate. And it was quiet. the most awkward quiet that an introvert could ever imagine. And they said, we had no idea we are absolutely going to change what we were talking about. And we all ended up having a team builder together. So, it's scary because we don't want to put ourselves out there. But man, when you speak up, again, about kind of the systemic bias and what people might think or feel, there's freedom on the other side of being your authentic self. So I'll invite the panel to speak on as well, and invite you all to, again, come to the mic. Please share your story. I'm sure the panel might have some suggestions, recommendations for maybe something that you're experiencing, a conversation you're anticipating, a decision you might need to make in your own career. I really would love to invite you to the conversation as well. But Brooke, any ideas of what workplaces can do to help kind of foster this type of introverted collaboration?
Yeah, I love this list. And I think, as we talk about diversity and inclusion, that needs to encompass a lot of things,
Yeah.
right? It needs to make room for people's different personalities, for their different comfort levels, no matter what that looks like as well. So, having that place to be able to harness that and have work be a safe space for everybody. It shouldn't be a space that you're dreading going to. It shouldn't be uncomfortable. You shouldn't have to break out in a sweat just to stand up for what you believe in. So, as if you are a leader and a manager in the room, really think about that for yourself and your teams. If you're somebody who's on a team, maybe you're not at a leadership or a management role yet, how can you have those conversations with your leader or your manager to make sure that you're all fostering that safe space to be comfortable for every single person to feel like they're included, they belong, and their voice matters. Another just little exercise that I did before with a group I was with, knowing that I had several introverted folks on the team, instead of saying, hey guys, we're going to sit down and do this big brainstorming session, I handed out pads of sticky notes to everybody and just said, write down your ideas on the sticky notes, go into the conference room, put your notes up on the wall, right? So it gave the time for people to think. They were comfortable because they could write down their ideas. They put them on the wall. I said, nobody's going to say whose idea is what. We're just going to come in and we're going to kind of talk about it. Well, some of the best ideas on the wall were from my introverted folks, right? Because maybe they weren't comfortable speaking up, but that gave them another way that they felt comfortable. It was a sticky note on the wall. Maybe they didn't even have to talk about their idea because somebody else was like, that was introverted or extroverted, was like, oh my gosh, this is like the greatest idea ever, let's talk about this one. So figuring out activities that you can do when you're in a team or a group setting that really harnesses that comfort level and that ability to give other people the platform to speak up.
Great. Gina, anything to add in terms of what workplaces can do to support this idea?
Yeah, it makes me think of recently, since I'm newer to the company, I was invited out to do a services training, and it was a 2.5 full days of some sort of training that was going to take place regarding the practice that we're in. And I remember thinking, well, what's going to go on for these 2.5 days? I have no idea who's going to be there. What's the agenda? What are the topics? What are we going to talk about? And the introvert in me sat on it for a little bit, and then I was like, okay, I need to know some details before I go there. So I reached out to the training manager, and I was like, hi, can you just share your agenda? What are some of the topics? And he was happy to jump on a call with me, go over what was going to go on during that services training and who I can expect to be present there, which allowed me to be a little bit prepared and more comfortable going in and being able to participate.
Great, thank you. Okay. So at this time, I would give a final invitation to anyone who would like to share a story, a question, an experience, or a comment. Yes, I'll ask you to come to the microphone so we can. Oh, no. Okay, I'll repeat it for you. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
So the point that I was going to add, what you've just said, is that I think there is another dimension, maybe many dimensions. I work with technology. I am an introvert. I am an active listener. I like the way that you put it. And I started, my work at the stock exchange, so it's always a male-dominated world. So I'm not trying to say here, men and women, but it's a fact. Mm-hmm. So saying something that is, and usually with very smart people and that really knew what they were saying, and if they say something wrong, it's fine. But if a woman goes and says something wrong, and then the introvert in me would be shut off forever, so I don't know if you've been through that, right? So I usually need to prepare myself a lot and make sure I understand, what is going on, like you said, being prepared to say something that is actually relevant. So that's another aspect, And again, I think maybe if you are an extrovert and someone says, oh, or do it like this, sometimes they dismiss, you would be okay. But for an introvert, for me, that really makes it difficult. So I think that's another dimension.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been on the receiving end of being dismissed. And yeah, it takes a skill set to be able to navigate that. Any reflections from the panel of, it's one thing to speak up. It's another thing to speak up and be challenged as an introvert, especially. Any thoughts or experiences or kind of reflections there?
Just want to say I feel for you. I empathize. Because as an extrovert, and I guess I'm just not afraid to be wrong, so I'll say whatever, like, we can talk about it, right? But that's an extrovert and part of my core personality, so I don't mind being challenged or being wrong. So I don't have any advice. I just want to say I empathize with you. And yeah, I just don't want you to be afraid to speak up if you are going to be challenged or you are going to be wrong, even if, that's going to try to shut you down. I don't have any good strategies to get over that. Maybe Gina will chime in here since she's more, but...
And it's okay, I am no longer young, so I've survived and I've learned.
You're still here.
But I think it's very important for the two kids, for anybody who goes through that to understand that, as you said, as a manager is one thing, but as, me being part of those meetings, I think something else for us to consider. But I'm good. I survived.
Good. Thank you so much. Gina, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been in those situations, and oftentimes it's kind of that fear of saying something wrong or not really knowing how someone's going to react to what you have to say kind of keeps me quiet and just being the active listener. But over time, I think I've kind of gotten over that, and especially with now having my children growing up and realizing I don't want them to have that same fear that I have, and I want them to speak up and to be more involved and challenge certain situations. So I'm trying myself to get out of that a little bit more and not worrying so much about what someone else is going to think, because oftentimes you probably have a great idea, and they'll probably appreciate that later.
All right. Thank you.
Good. Next. Hi.
Hi, good morning. So I was just wondering, sometimes as leaders, it is your job, or you kind of have to, even if you don't want to, facilitate some difficult or uncomfortable but very necessary conversations. So I was just wondering, as an introvert, what are some strategies or mental tactics that you can use to kind of help you, develop the skill that you need to really facilitate and just initiate and start those conversations, and to make sure that they keep going so that it's not just like a one-time thing, but so that you can actually positively impact a culture?
Yeah, so with someone that I had in a previous position reporting into me, she was also an introvert. And so you have two introverts together, and how do you go about managing that? So I set up regular check-ins with her, like one-on-ones to get to know her a little bit more, but I had it focused on, what do you think is going well? Where are you getting stuck? What can I do to better support you? And that's how I kind of outlined our meetings together, which then she started to open up more, and I realized, okay, this is working, this isn't. How can I change what I'm doing to better support her so that she can be more successful in her role?
I feel like this is a good one for you. I feel like you might have some good comments here.
Yeah, so difficult conversations. I've learned to change my perspective. So I've learned that the conversation wasn't difficult because of the content. I was comfortable with the content, and I knew the way I felt about the content, whether I agreed with it, whether, all the work that I put into it. I researched this, I've got all this stuff ready. So I knew that I knew what I was talking about. I'll never forget, and I solicited the help of my executive coach with this. I was in a meeting with some regional leaders, and I was proposing paid parental leave for the entire company. And initially, the group was supportive of it, but only for female employees, right? So a female employee has a baby, goes out. We were prepared to make that entirely 100% paid. And for most companies, that would have been a win. That's awesome. Paid time, no stress, et cetera. But I didn't want paid time just for females. I wanted paid time for males and females because I know from personal experience that it's a family ordeal. It's not just a woman who needs time off, that men need time off too. And I remember from my experience having 2 C-sections, how that first couple weeks it's a medical condition. You know, I can't do the things I want to do because of personal medical health. So I was pitching this idea. I had the costs, I had industry standards, I had everything you could want. And the conversation was revolving around paid parental leave for females. So I could either just take what I could get and get the heck out of there, or I could push for what I knew would be the most impactful for my client group. Well, I decided to push. So I was pushing to include men in this policy so that they too would have the exact same amount of time off as female employees. And over the course of probably 3 conversations with the team who was the decision maker, I received so much pushback. And it was literally one person in particular who just happened to have a lot of weight on this topic. So it got into this back and forth with him and I. He's like, well, I don't think that this is particularly relevant. And again, I, being the introvert a while ago in my career, I'm horrified. I'm like, okay, I want out. I changed my mind. It's not important. Just give me what you said. I'll take it and we'll be done, right? So I'm in this literal hostile kind of heated debate with this person. And so I held on to what I knew, because from my experience, I mean, I've been married for 19 years and I know what that stress can do to a family. So I have the experience and I have the impact in my head, and I'm using that to push me. And as of January 1 of 2024, we will have paid parental leave for both men and women with the exact same amount of time. But what I learned through that, and I used my executive coach because I got stuck. I was deer in the headlights. I was ready to get out. I was sorry I even brought the topic up. What I learned is that I was not struggling with the content. I knew what I knew. I was struggling with how to navigate the perception of how I handled that pushback. I didn't want this more senior person with more clout. Everybody knew him, liked him, respected him, with Renisha coming in with this diverse idea, this radical thing. I didn't want it to be career defining. And so what I learned through that is that there's a saying that my executive coach has of stay above the line. So below the line is when you're in self-doubt, when you're fearful of perception, you're kind of in your feelings type of mindset. Staying above the line is you are laser focused on the objective. So if someone says, you don't know what you're talking about, I'm not gonna react to that. I'm not gonna say, well, yes, I do. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to show that I can verbally go back and forth. I'm here to show my impact and what I know from my value and my expertise and my knowledge. So by not allowing the personal attacks or, this person slighted me and all of that, by not allowing that to derail me, I stayed laser focused on what I knew I wanted to accomplish. And so sometimes I say all that to say, sometimes the conversation is only difficult because we're in a fearful mindset. So if you stay focused on your strategic value and bring your knowledge to the conversation and just stay on that, you get to stay much more defined and more clear. So I would say keep at it, keep what you know in your head, and try not to get distracted by the irrelevant comments that come your way. Yeah. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, I just had a really quick comment and question on something I said earlier. So as a more introverted person, I do cling on to more extroverted people as buddies and people to kind of help guide me through. But how do you kind of manage and not allow your more extroverted friend to kind of overshadow the things that you're doing as well, and finding that balance? Because I am totally okay with someone who wants to talk and wants to do all the things doing it, but realizing that in order to move forward, that you have to also kind of take that step. So how do you find balance in that?
Yeah, so I think get to be comfortable with them and let them know what you want, right? And it's going to take a level of comfort and knowing somebody before you're going to just be like, hey, can you not talk over me every time I'm talking, or whatever it might be, right? Or, hey, explain your goals. This is something I want to try to do. You're really extroverted. I always appreciate that you're taking me along, but I want to be able to try to do X, Y, Z. Like, I want to be able to try to speak up in a meeting tomorrow. Can you maybe pause and like throw the mic my way, right? So I'd just say be honest and open about your goals and what you want. If it is a person who really does know you well and likes you and wants to support you and advocate for you, they'll do it, right? But we as extroverts don't know what you need. You have to tell us, because we're just gonna talk and assume, right? So the best I've found is when people, I was mentoring a younger person, and I was trying to give her some suggestions, and she said, I cannot do that. Like, I will die if you have me do that. And I'm like, okay, let's back off. What are we not gonna die if we do? So like, kind of figuring out that conversation. And if you feel like your extroverted people aren't listening to you, just ask them to listen. I feel like that goes a long way, to just be like, hey, I feel like you're not hearing me. Can you take a beat to like listen, or can you maybe think about this and then let's talk about it? Because yeah, extroverts are very on the fly and we can just talk. But sometimes we don't take the time to listen and to reflect, and that's what our introverted counterparts really need. So ask us to, right? Tell us what you need, ask us to help you out. I don't think anybody wouldn't do that, especially if, somebody that you know well and that you're partnered up with. It just kind of takes you, maybe it's the courage or figuring out what your comfort spot is or what you do want to do, and then kind of really going along with that. And push back on them, because the extroverts are going to get excited, right? We're going to be like, oh, yeah, she wants to like speak up in a meeting, and we're going to be like, she wants to speak, and you're going to be like, oh my God, I don't want to speak. So, just kind of making sure that that's very well defined and clearly communicated with your partners. But yeah, just ask for what you want and for what you need, and I'm pretty sure that extroverted counterparts will support you.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. You're partnering up with them for a reason. So just having the open communication and the clear goals that you're trying to achieve for yourself, I think that your extroverted partner will just appreciate that and be excited for you.
Good. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Much like Gina, I'm in a field where introverts, it's very awkward. So I'm a recruiter, and I talk to people all day long, and I'll tell you, as much as of an introvert as I am, it fills my cup to help people. So I don't know how that mix came about, but it works. A tip to the extroverts in the room: find your introvert and take them under your wing. So I know that Gina mentioned one-on-ones help. My manager knows that I'm an introvert, even though I'm a team lead and my team of 11 looks to me for questions. She takes me aside and she says, hey, we're having a meeting before this. What are your thoughts beforehand? So that really helps. Also have a question. As an introvert, or as an extrovert, what advice would you have for an introvert looking to get into leadership, but is that person's not the greatest at bragging about what they can do?
You want to go? Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh.
I think it kind of goes back to a theme that you've kind of heard: finding a mentor, a coach, an advocate, right? That could be the person in leadership that maybe is making that decision, getting to know them, having them understand you and know you on a different level. Because maybe what they don't see is you shouting your accomplishments to the rooftop, but you can have that one-on-one meeting. Maybe if you feel comfortable asking them to go to coffee, hey, just want to go to coffee, want to talk over a couple ideas or thoughts that I may have, just get your feedback on it. That's a good way to kind of sit down with somebody else and have them understand where you are and what your talents are. That's not shouting it from the rooftops or in a big group setting. Maybe that makes you feel more comfortable. And I'm going to put it back on the extroverts too. Like, I just feel like we need to understand that there's different people with power out there that we need to be looking at. So, if you are an introvert and you feel like you're being overlooked, find an extrovert that is willing to take you there, right? Because there's those of us out there. We understand the quiet power that a lot of different people have, and we want to be able to harness that on our teams, because diversity is what drives and grows all of us. So being able to kind of seek those people out, because introverts are so thoughtful, you can probably pick them out who they are. You could probably think of you right now know, you're like, oh, that's Bill or that's Sam or whatever, right? So I think make partnerships with those people, even if it's a one-on-one. Have them understand where you are, what your thoughts and ideas are in a way that makes you comfortable, and have them understand those boundaries too. Hey, I'm comfortable talking to you on a one-on-one, or this is what I want. So be your own best advocate. I know that's hard because there's the fear of rejection, or you say it once and then you're going to shut down forever, like she said earlier. But I think just being comfortable with that. Like, you might get a no, but that's okay. You'll live through it. You're going to get a lot of no's. We all hear no a lot. So you got to just keep asking, and asking in a way that makes you feel comfortable. So that's kind of my advice in general, is just, find those advocates or those coaches or people that can help you out. And there's a ton of resources. So if you want to do some of your own self-development, and we'll get to it here in a second, but there's tons of books, there's articles, there's TED Talks that really talk about introverts harnessing their power, how they, oh, right on cue, I like it, how they can, go about it. I think we put a couple of our different favorite things up here. Introvert Dear is a great website that has a lot of different content and articles. So start there. I mean, you're going to have to read through or look at a lot of different things and figure out what resonates for you, and then build a strategy around that. So that would be my advice to move forward.
Thank you.
Good. And one thing I'll add to that, just to living proof that it works. Very recently, within the last, I would say, 10 days or so, I was having a conversation with a peer of mine, and she was saying about how she's been, so my role is to support manufacturing across US, Canada, and Mexico, and there was a particular area that I hadn't been to yet. And so she was asking me, she was like, oh, why haven't you toured that area before? And I just, because her and I are so comfortable with each other, we have really, really good partnership. And by the way, she is the poster child for extroverts. I mean, wow. Like, really, really extroverted. I mean, physically, like, hyperactive type thing. But there's so much value in our partnership. And so she said, well, why haven't you been out? It would be really good for you to see this area. And I just honestly and transparently said, I don't even know where to start. I don't know who to reach out to. And the next thing I know, she didn't say anything. She was just like, oh, okay. Next thing I know, I get a voicemail from her saying, hey, I have a friend by the name of Sean. He's going to reach out to you. He's the sales guy at the place you said you've never been to. He wants to tour with you and your team. Like, I didn't even have to. It's when you put yourself out there, which is scary and hard and vulnerable, but there are so many people who are there to support you and want to see you winning. So by simply me just saying, I don't know where to start, she made a connection that I don't even know who this Sean guy is, but he's here to enhance my own development. So to Brooke's point, if people don't know what you need, you literally have to open up your mouth to receive those type of opportunities. But when you do, I promise there's so many people who are there to kind of fill that gap for you. So I promise it works when you ask for help. Yes.
I have two comments and one question.
Yeah.
And I would say that I'm a born introvert, but a learned extrovert. I read a lot about how to get help. One of the two books I've read recently is Quiet and The Introvert Edge. So I find those books to be very helpful. Okay. So that is my first comment. Second comment is that I think as an introvert, we have to be very mindful of our mannerism, the way we present ourselves. Because it can come off as a weakness, or as timid, as unsure, even though we're we're SMEs in our area. So we got to be mindful how we come off and reflect in our meetings and with our bosses and such. So that is my second comment. My question to you guys is, given post-COVID, and we all work from home, or we all have some kind of hybrid or remote role, as an extrovert, how are you encouraged to ensure that you network, keep abreast of what's happening in your world, in your area, to ensure that you're not lost in the world of your field, technology, or just overall networking? Because you can get very comfortable working remotely and forgetting to participating with your peers and other leaders and such.
Yeah.
I'll start with self-discipline, right? So you have to kind of set your goals for yourself and really follow through on those. So, things like this are great, where we have groups of people getting together. So just by you being here, participating, you taking the first step, right? Because even people, you know, you are used to working from home. Oh, I don't want to go to a conference. I don't want to go back. I don't want to pull out the pants or whatever. Like, I get it, right? We're all in our yoga pants and it's good. But, you know, self-discipline. So what goals do you want to accomplish? What do you still want to do with your career? What do you want to learn? I mean, the internet's a massive place, right? You can connect with a colleague on LinkedIn or connect with somebody else. Maybe they know something that you don't know, and really kind of network that way. Events like this are great to be able to make sure, you know, set a goal. I'm going to come to this event. I'm going to talk to 5 people. You know, as an extrovert, you guys can do that. Introverts are probably cringing right now. But, you know, just kind of being out there to meet people and really stay focused on it. Personally, I'm a scientist, and science moves super fast. And so I make it a goal. There's several sites that I follow. There's articles that I'll read. And I have a goal for myself that I have 20 touch points a week, no matter what that is. Even if it's just I read a headline and I understand what XYZ pharma company is doing today. So that's how I keep up on things. Even though I'm sitting in my home office by myself, I'm not necessarily in a university or in a lab or in a big company. But then when I do have the opportunities, because I do visit clients, when I do have the opportunities to be on site with them, I just soak all of that up as much as possible. I'm taking notes, things that I can look up, things that I can do later. And that's where that self-discipline comes in. After you walk away, make sure that you're following through on those activities so you are constantly learning. Because I think hopefully we're all constant. Hopefully we all have the opinion that we should be constantly learning and growing and changing. And you can't do that if you're not looking out at other platforms, understanding things, meeting new people maybe, reading new articles. So make that a goal for yourself and then be disciplined about it. Make sure you follow through with it. It's the same as getting your workout in. It's the same as drinking your cup of coffee. Maybe you're drinking your cup of coffee while you're looking at your, you know, articles about your industry. Like, have it be paired with something fun too. So you're not like, oh, I gotta read about, I don't know, assay development today. That's fun. Like, make it something that's paired up with something that you enjoy.
Good. All right. Final chance. No other question. Okay, go for it.
Hi again. Another question. I was just wondering, as an introverted leader, how can you kind of set the tone for the people that you work with and make yourself open and available and approachable? I know sometimes with me, I have RBF, so that makes me unapproachable sometimes, or it intimidates people. But also just being introverted, some people are like, oh, I don't really want to bother her, or like, or, you know, I don't want to annoy this person, or like they don't seem like they want to talk. How can you counter that and set that tone and let people know that you're open to ideas and that you're approachable and that you really want to work with and listen to them?
Yeah, I often try to like lead by example, and oftentimes, like, let's say we have something that a deadline coming up and they're putting in their work, I'll often work with them and we'll get that work done together. I think having you know, regular touch points with people, but also letting them know, like, hey, on every Monday between this time and this time, I'm pretty open. So if you have any questions, concerns, or you want to bounce an idea off of me, feel free to reach out to me during that time period. And if you don't catch me during that time, then shoot me an email or a text message or something, and I'll get back to you when my, you know, schedule allows. But having that open time, I think, is a great way to, you know, have them be more approachable for your team.
I echo that, like in office hours if you can, right? So that way people just, they know that you're willing and available to talk to them. So just putting it out there, you know, or, hey, I'm gonna go grab coffee every Thursday from whatever, 12 to 1, if anyone wants to come along, like I'd love to chat with you. So yeah, being approachable is tough sometimes too, and as a fellow woman with RBF, like, I can understand, I feel you, because they're like, oh, Brooke's just gonna be mean to me or whatever, and I'm not, like, I'll be nice, but you know, having other people approach you, you just have to make sure you're kind of setting stuff out there. So like an office hours makes sense for you, or a group coffee, or something that you feel like makes sense for you, that people can get to know you a little bit better. Because once they get to know you, then they're going to be comfortable with you. So you just have to do that first step of getting whatever platform makes you comfortable as an introvert to let them get to know you. And then if that's one-on-one, if it's office hours, if it's a group setting, if it's being more intentional, you know, hey, Jamie, we haven't talked before. Can we go grab a quiet corner for 20 minutes? Just want to get to know you a little bit better. Just making sure you're reaching out too in whatever way makes you feel comfortable as an introvert, just to kind of build those relationships.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, Thank you very much. Well, we have approached the end of our session. I want to thank you all. I want to thank our panel for the effort, the insights, the education and experience they've shared today. Thank you for joining in the conversation and sharing your experience. I will ask for your participation to complete the survey. You will receive a survey at the conclusion of the event. So please take the time. It really helps make sure that all the sessions are value added going forward. Without further ado, thank you and have a great day.